Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. We have an amazing guest. His name is Mr. Donald Kelly. Donald owns a company called the Sales Evangelist. We are discussing today why 57% of individuals who are selling today are not hitting quota, and why 67%, just reported by Gartner, a research group, of companies say they're not hitting quota collectively. And we're going to discuss why A players, in other words, the top 1%, what they do differently than the ones who are average or performing, and what's the difference and why this happens, and how companies can use these type of individuals to up their quota and no longer be part of that terrible statistic, really, when it comes down to it. So without further ado, let's go talk to Donald. Donald, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you being here.
Of course. I'm really excited for this, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of the audience and to share some insights. I get passionate about selling, so I may get too excited and then start speaking fast. Just tell me to calm down. But I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, good. You and I have known each other for a couple of years, and it's as I always say, I learn something from everybody. But when I come off the call with you, a lot of times I'm writing things down. I'm like, wow, I didn't think of it in that capacity. So I appreciate you being here. I know everybody's going to appreciate this, because we're going to talk about, I'm going to call them 1%ers, right? The elite performers, right? As we go along. And, the stats that come out in the recent ones, why 57% of individual sellers are not hitting their quota on a regular basis today. And it just blows my mind every time, I see these statistics, because over the years I see different statistics, but that tells me 43% of people are. So there's 57% aren't, 43% are. What do you think the difference is between those two?
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's like you mentioned, it's an age-old challenge. And I think a lot of it comes down to is that they're disciplined in their craft. I mean, when you look at it and I think we can pull together and folks who may be entrepreneurs or coaches or people who are small business owners selling in that as well. Oftentimes I find that the sales professional side, the individual contributors working in an organization, feel that they have the gift of gab or the capabilities to be able to woo someone. So then therefore they feel that they're a good seller, and they've got lucky so often enough that they go on that luck and think that that's great selling. I mean, like, say for instance, if you were to throw a ball at a woods of a tree in the woods, there's a likelihood you're going to hit something. And I think that's what a lot of salespeople do. But what if the top performers, they always hit? And it's like they're targeted and they're focused because they have a plan, they have a focus. And again, they understand that their craft is a craft and they need to be disciplined at it. Some of the underperforming sellers, they may just wing it when they make a phone call. They know what the messaging could be, so they play with that, and they don't have a consistent verbiage that they're utilizing. Their emails are kind of sporadic. Their social outreach game is not necessarily quite there fully, and opportunities come in, and so they feel that they're good. But is 70% or 60% really dictating, showing that you're a good seller? Of course not. But we oftentimes agree and accept that rather than looking and saying what's making the top performers hit 100% or 150% of quota. It's because they have a plan. And it's translated the same thing with businesses. Oftentimes I see business owners, coaches, or SMB companies, they're a technician. They know their craft. They understand their industry. They're an engineer. Go back to the E-Myth. And because of that, they don't necessarily want to do the selling. They figure sales will come. If I build it, if I do my craft well enough, people will come to me. But people don't know what you have to offer until they know what you have to offer. So it's imperative that we as an organization have a plan, have a process, and have a system that allows us to be able to bring in net new business inside of our organization. Because it doesn't matter how good you are as an engineer, if your sales department is not generating net new revenue, your organization is not going to last. It's the most important or critical role within any company, because that function needs to be on point. So now we'll go back to look at it when it comes towards the sales professionals. Sometimes these small businesses, they'll bring in a individual contributor when they're ready to grow their business even further and say, well, the salesperson could take care of that. But if you don't have a system and process for these salespeople, they come in with nasty habits that they learn maybe when they're doing car sales because you thought they were great at that. And they're trying to figure that stuff out and translate it into your business. You need to have the process. You need to have the system. You know how to sell the product best. Get that in place first before you bring somebody on so they can follow that system. And then the same idea as a sales leader, if you're listening to this, or individual contributor, you need to make sure the company that you're working with have that system and process so you can be set up for success. In our company, we follow this principle called we strive for excellence in all that we do. So this means that every individuals on our team, whether it's in the sales side or any matter of the function departments, need to be able to strive for excellence in all they do, every single craft that they're doing. So we don't want to get that 60, 70% of quota. Yes, that's money, but that's not what our goal is. We want to hit and surpass our goal. That's excellence. We're behaving best we're performing to the best of our capabilities. And that's what we really, really want to strive for.
So, it's interesting to me when you say 70%, right? Because imagine, we drive 100 times, I don't know, let's take a month, right? And we're going to go down the highway. And 70 out of 100 times, we don't wreck our car. But 30 times out of 100, we wreck our car. Right? No one would accept that. Right?
No way.
Firstly, you'd never get insurance again. You'd probably hardly even have your license, right? So, yeah. So the insurance companies wouldn't take it. The regulatory board who issues our licenses, for driving wouldn't take it. I'm sure the attorneys on the other side that would be involved in the lawsuits that would happen, they wouldn't accept that. Like, oh, yeah, you're 70% good, man. Why the world do people in sales, like owners of companies, leaders of organizations, leaders who have sales, VPs, presidents of sales, whatever, why the heck are they going, 70% is okay?
Yeah. I think one of the pieces to that too is that the top performers are taking the cake. They're bringing up the rear, and unfortunately, that's they may be getting the results from that, and they're fine with it, or it's acceptable, and they compensate for it. They might say, "All right, we know that the bottom rung of our sellers are not going to hit their numbers, and we know like Jake and Lisa and Amber and Scott are going to hit their numbers, so they're going to be able to take care of the load for us." But I just feel that that doesn't make sense. And I think oftentimes to come back to is because the organization don't have the processes in place. And it's been going on like this for a long time. Like you said, Doug, it's not something that's new underneath the sun. But I gave a speech at Outbound this year, a sales conference. And one of the things that I spoke about was go back to attorneys. Like attorneys never pick, like you never find an injury attorney or any type of attorney that's going to pick a case unless they know they could win that case. And oftentimes what happened with salespeople is that they pick these deals or quote unquote cases that they're not necessarily sure they can win, but they're just guessing and hoping. We need to be precision. We need to have precision with our craft. We need to evaluate and ensure that the people or the cases we're going after, the deals, are the highest probability of closing. And that requires us to be able to have a function behind it. But I again go back to why the sales leaders, it's because it's been going on for a long time. And I'll give you another example that proved this too. Most sales leaders will tell their sales team, we need you to have 3x your pipeline because crap happens. And we know that somebody gets sick, somebody leaves their job and so forth. So, but 3x your pipeline. So this is incentivizing my sellers then to say, all right, you could have 2/3 of those deals we know are not going to close. So it's okay even if you have 1/3 of crap in there, just put it in a pipeline so we can have the pipeline because that we are not expecting all of it to close. But again, that's not striving for excellence in all that you're doing, right? That's not being precision in your craft, is it? No way.
This comes down, there's no 1% manager on that thing, right? A manager's job is to grow a team, period.
Yep.
Right. So no manager in their right mind would, I don't know, let's take professional sports. Hey guys, go out there. Let's lose 1/3 of the game. We're going to, let's go out. Let's lose 1/3 of the season. Right. I mean, they're not doing that. And, that's because they're pro sports teams, right? And there's a lot of money involved in those things and their job is on the line. But when it comes to sales, people have that mediocrity. But when it comes to the top 1%, and you and I have talked about this in the past, the top 1%, they don't really look at quota as quota. They look at quota kind of as a baseline. It's like, you know what? If I don't hit this month, I failed. But they're not looking at quota as the failure point. They're looking at quota as like, that's so far downstream, I don't even think about it. I'm hitting 150, 200% every single month as my baseline. And that's who's carrying the team. And Donald, you had said it. I mean, I'm going to brag a little on my end here, right? I mean,
please.
I was a major account executive for a company and I had 9 people on my team, and every single month without fail, I outsold all 9 of them together combined. Right. And so, yeah. In fact, I was doing this sometimes. Some months I was outselling 2 or 3 teams combined of teams of 9. And people were wondering, like, what is this kid doing? Because and all I did was created a massive prospecting process coming into the thing. And I had systems just like you were saying, right?
Yeah.
But the point being is my manager used to take credit for having the best team in the company. Right? Because they looked at top line numbers, but when you drilled, you know where I'm going, right? You're shaking your finger. No, man. But the reality is I was making up for the bottom third and shoring it up, right? So why don't people just go out and find top 1%ers? Like, I know they're not as easy to find as the lower end of the producers, but
yeah.
Why not make that your bottom line standard? And then like, hey, everybody's hitting 110% quota. That's our bottom line standard. And now we don't have to raise quota, but we're just going to find people who are going to just look at that and go, I'm going to blow that out 200-300%.
I think go back to the baseball analogy again that you're sharing. Like, I mean, there's a law of averages that kind of fall in there. And I would say overall, so there's 2 points I would go back to. One, the law of averages, that not everyone is going to live to that high altitude, that high expectation and do or be that type of seller that's going to be a top performing seller. You're going to have folks that are role players and so forth. But then the other side to that too, I feel, is that the overall industry where most salespeople, again, they could have a decent living, Doug. They can make $60,000, $75,000 a year, and then commission on top of that. If you get another $30,000, $20,000 a year, $90,000 is not bad for somebody living in Alabama, or for somebody living in like the Midwest somewhere. That's not. It's living okay and living good. So therefore, they don't feel that push or that incentive. But imagine if the sales industry was really pushed even further on the idea of your performance, and individuals needed to be judged based on that even more so, I find that more people would step up to the game or step up to the plate, because they're just being coddled. If it's okay for me to hit 70% of my numbers, 60% of my numbers, and be a good person, and I'm still fine, then that's great. But I think the organizations that they really want to get those top performers, it's hard to find them. One, because industry is allowing for underperformance. And then 2, this just either way, we're still going to always find that the law of averages. But I do feel that companies, they could have more than just 20% that are top performers. You could do more than we should expect more than that. But we accept it far too often and far too consistently.
Yeah, what I have found is that the more demanding the management side of it is, the more people step up. It's kind of like in the military. When I was in the military, right? There were a lot of guys, and there were no women back then because I'm that old, folks. But back then it was, the guys were coming in, but many of the guys that I served with came in and they had a choice. Either you go into the United States Army or you go to jail. right? That was their choice. So when they came in, and it surprised me because I was a kid from a small middle class neighborhood that I never really met those type of individuals, and so there were enough of them that it was pretty prominent. What never ceased to amaze me is when they got into a highly structured, highly disciplined, and highly demanding environment with real high consequences if they didn't perform to that environment, they stepped up and they admittedly said, hey, I'm a better person. I feel better about myself. I feel more confident about myself, and they would, make rank quicker. They were, I remember the movie Rambo. Rambo would say, I in the military, I would have $25 million pieces of equipment that I would run, but here I can't park cars, right? That type of thing. Get a job parking cars. And so I find that if we structure that environment, it doesn't have to be boot camp, guys and gals, and he, she, or they, right? But it's one of those things that if it's demanding, and I've always done this of the people that I managed, and I brought them to a place and they'd be like, okay, I got 40% close. I'm like, you sure it shouldn't be 47? And they'd be like, you're a jerk. And I'm like, am I? Or are you just not living up to your potential, right? So if we hold people to that potential, what I find is people bring that potential up anyways. But we, as individuals, it's easy. It's like, oh, well, you know what? I'm not fat today, but I'll just keep eating an extra cookie every day. And then 6 months from now, I look and I go, oh my God, I gained 8 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Right. But if we had a personal trainer on the other end going, you ate a cookie, slap, right? Not maybe a physical slap, but, you want to really hit your goal, those type of things. So a lot of this, and I'm sorry, managers and vice presidents and presidents, I've been there, I've done that, right? But the reality is, if we don't hold them accountable, then the people will tend to take the path of least resistance. And like you said, Donald, if they live in Alabama and they're making $90,000 a year, they're actually living a decent life.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in New York City, you're going to be sharing a pizza with a rat, right? That type of thing. So the environment will sometimes hold people accountable. What do you think leaders, because you gave me a stat before we started this. I think it was like 60. Could you quote it, please?
Yeah. Gartner, LinkedIn just launched a tool called Deep Sales. And in the report, they shared some figure from Gartner latest reporting that showed that 67% of sales leaders reported that their organization missed their target in the month of July in 2022. So whenever you're listening to this podcast, so that's 3 months from ago, 67% of organizations, the sales leaders reported that they missed their targets.
And there's a myriad of reasons why that's probably the case, right? I mean, certainly certain companies are, economics all of a sudden whacked them, in some cases. But here's the thing. Again, being old, I can say these things now, right? When I was 20s, now that I'm 60, I've been in the game a long time selling. And what I have found now that in a recession, and I'm looking for your feedback on this, Donald. Sure. In a recession, I have always taught people, look, now's the time to gain market share.
Amen. Come on. Get me excited. Let's go.
Okay. All right. I can see you're a big pro on this one, so that's a good one. So, but now's the time to gain market share more than ever. And because traditionally what happens in a recession is people get nervous. So your competitors get nervous and they start pulling back. They pull back on two things initially: marketing and sales.
Come on, Doug. Come on, man. Come on. I don't want to say anything about this because I'm giving secrets away here with you. We're gonna get people ahead and too far ahead.
So, well, experience dictates something here, right? Between the two of us, we've got, we're not Centurion yet, but we're getting close. So I always found that's kind of the craziest thing to do, right? You cut off all the leads that you can get, and you get rid of the people who are actually converting sales. And then the sales engineer, as you were alluding to earlier, will have nothing to do. Yeah. Right. It's kind of a spiral death of spiraling. So my point being is, do you believe now more than ever, because I think you do based on your reaction, now more than ever that leaders of companies now should be stepping up more than ever and training their people and helping their people and just pushing their people to be in that top 1%, even if they get to the top 3% versus the top 1%, it's still a marked improvement. And that person that's making $90,000 a year now is making $140,000 or $150,000 a year in sales. The quality of life is so different between that, I suspect, in Alabama. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh man, I don't know how much time we have, but let me just start off by saying this. I want to give another visual compared to what you're saying. Again, when I ran track in high school, and when you're doing the 400 meters, like that's one time around the track. Inevitably, where people are going to fall out is at that 200-meter mark. Like that part is just because the 400 meter is a grueling race. It is a sprint. So what will happen, people will jump out the gate and they start going really fast and try to get like ahead of you and quote unquote get more market share. And that's fine. Everything is great. All things are created equal. But when you get to that 200-meter mark, that's when the economy, quote unquote, start to go bad. And what I want to do at that point, you can say, well, I want to conserve my energy till the 100. No. I'm going to start at that 200 and start my sprint there. And I'm going to take as much market share, get in front of more people as possible at that point when they're the weakest and when they think they're going to wait till they get some juice or get some energy at the 100. I am going to kill you starting at 200 and bring that thing all the way down until the very end of the race. And when I get to that 50-yard line, I'm going to waste you even further because I'm so much further ahead. The same concept applies. And I didn't mean to say kill because I know when people get crazy about what I'm with that idea. But the point is, metaphorically, I'm going to take over at that point. And when it comes towards this idea, I'm 38 this year. I keep track of my age now. So 38. And back in 2008, I went through that. And when I was finishing up college, 2010, I started in the workforce, and it was really challenging trying to sell during that time period, getting into software sales. And then eventually we saw the same idea again coming back in 2020, we saw some little issues. And both times what I saw with people before me, there's a sales guy, and I don't ascribe to his way of selling. However, you can't beat the idea in this industry. So Grant Cardone, in 2008, he recognized that. And one of the things that Grant did was he wrote like several books at that same books, like I think he said in like 45 days, he wrote a book, the whole idea of the 10X, and he was everywhere. When everybody was running back to the hills because they're, like you said, they're retreating, he just decided to go everywhere and saturate market when it comes towards sales. And he killed it on YouTube and he killed it all over this place. And eventually he got the 10X event and all the stuff that came from it because he was going out hunting, taking over market share when everyone was running back and hiding. So the same concept applies. When 2020 came around and we saw the crisis that were going on, a bunch of people were trying to figure out, what am I going to do? And I was scared. I'm telling you, Doug, because I saw like a lot of reoccurring revenue just started drying up, and I was like, "Holy moly, what do I do at this point? Do I sit back and go in the house and square and be afraid?" But I started going on podcasts, started being everywhere as much as I possibly could, and that helped a lot. And eventually, opportunities like several months later came, and what I saw happen, and this is why I'm telling you this because I saw the data. Companies started to realize that they weren't making money. And then say like after like around the June, summertime, we started to see an uptick where they're like, we need our salespeople that we have to be better. So they started looking at me to do more training, and we got a lot more opportunities. And 2020 became actually a really good year for us. So there was this dip, and then we saw the uptick. So what I started looking ahead of this, and then as soon as I started hearing people say stuff about like the R word on in news and so forth, I was like, this is a time to punch on the gas. And we did polls and so forth, and we saw things within our industry. We said, you know what, we're punching double on our gas. So everywhere, Doug, I'm on. If you follow me on social media, and this is a strategy, it seemed like I'm everywhere doing everything because that's the idea. I'm trying to take over my market share in places where most of my people competitors probably want to cut back, because I know what's going to happen again when they get to that 100-meter mark. They're going to try to hit that sprint. Once they get to the part where they see their numbers dip enough, they're going to say, oh man, we need to put some more resources now. But this is a critical component, a critical time period where we need to push on the gas. So now go back to the idea. As a sales professional, it takes a skillful seller to be able to sell during challenging times. This is where it separates the kids from the adults. It separates the professional from the amateurs, because the amateurs, again, they wing it, Doug. They sit back and they just send out these basic emails. They send the crap that you get from, like the old school emails. And if they send enough out and throw enough spaghetti at the wall, some things hit. But in a market like this, where it's a little bit more challenging and people are being cognizant about the money that they're spending, The talented sellers can create business cases or create reasons, or what we call blindside challenge, point out to companies and to decision makers and stakeholders the importance of problems that they're not even focusing on that will be a hindrance towards them. And that takes skill, that takes craft, that takes persistence, that takes a process. And that's why top performers will thrive during this time period. I want to give a big shout out to Jeb Blunt on his book, Selling in a Crisis. You can see a lot of those components that Jeb just released in his book about how these top performing sellers, how they're strategic and how they can sell during crisis and still be successful compared to the underperforming sellers. And man, I got on my soapbox there for a minute.
Oh, good. I like Jeb too. So it's you know what? I never gave you a shout out. We just got going, brother. We're speaking to Mr. Donald Kelly. He owns a company called the Sales Evangelist. Donald, how do people get a hold of you? I'm sure that your passion is coming through here for sure.
Yeah, you can find me on any of the platforms. You can find me on LinkedIn, Donald C. Kelly, Insta, Donald C. Kelly, and Twitter, Donald C. Kelly. Spend a lot of my time on Insta and LinkedIn, LinkedIn more so. But if you want to get free content that we have, you can go to the salesevangelist.com. And on that page, we have a resource tab. We have free training courses. Like if you're taking advantage of LinkedIn, we have another free general sales training course teaching you fundamentals of like outreach. And then we have a ton of podcast episodes that we share a lot of insights on and whatnot. So.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Alan Weiss once said to me, he said, you got to get out there and get into the public square. Right. And that's what I heard you do. You're out there and you're in the public square. And if people don't know what the public square is, in the old days, you had a town center, right? And you would get up there and you would speak, right? And I saw this, I was in Northampton, Massachusetts, and this guy was out in front of a church in the public square, and he was going off about something. I didn't even know what he was talking about. But the fact that he was just out there and deliberately going out and getting a message out and doing this, it stopped me enough to say, what the heck is this guy actually talking about? Now, he was a terrible speaker. Sorry, sir. But, so he didn't keep my attention. But the reality is he got my attention, right? Yeah. And the top 1%, they don't wait for other people to tell them to get out into the public square. They just go and start getting out in the public square. And they don't look at it and say, oh, my company, if they're working for one, maybe my company is the only one who pays for this. They will actually look at their sales process or their sales career as part of their responsibility for going forth and doing that, and going out and, going to networking events, going and doing these things, right? Because they treat this like their own separate business when it comes down to it. Donald, I could talk to you all day long, as you and I both know. I'm very grateful you're here. I know a lot of people have probably written about 3 pages of notes on this. I'd love to have you back on another episode if you're up for it.
Always love to come back.
All right, awesome. Well, then I'm going to thank you, Mr. Donald Kelly from the Sales Evangelist, being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks. Very grateful you're here.
Appreciate it, Doug. Thank you.
All right. Respected discipline. That means we respect the discipline that we have in order to invoke the end result we want. So we're committed to that process. Respected discipline is one of the reasons that most people are not hitting their quotas today and that companies are not hitting their quotas today. Now, respected discipline on the company side could be that the managers, the leaders, they're not holding accountability to the actual numbers. They accept things like, hey, I hit 80% quota, I hit 85% quota, I hit 90% quota. Why would you want to do that as an owner of a company? Why not say, look, this is quota. This is what I'm paying you for. This is why you're here, right? If you can't hit quota, you can't be here. We'll find other people to hit quota and exceed that. And if you're the individual thinking, you say, well, I have a bad month. Of course, everybody has a bad month, but are you having bad months month after month after month after month after month? Look at what you're doing. Do you have systems, processes, details, procedures around these things? Do you have things holding yourself accountable? If you do, you will sell more. If you don't, you will sell less. It's that simple. 1% earners in the world don't look at quota as this is something I have to achieve. They look at it as a baseline. In other words, it's like, so what? got a quota. I don't care about quota. I'm going to double, triple that anyways, right? They don't look at it as like, oh, I got to reach quota. They look at it as, that's the minimum viable starting point in the process. Loved what Donald said around running the 400 meter, right? He said that the best companies in his company that and what Pete teaches his people to do is you are going to sprint at the 200 mark. So you're going to stay pace and you're going to stay ahead of people all the way up to the 200. But halfway through, man, you're pushing the pedal down and you're just going, right? Because you just blow away the competition doing that. That's what 1%ers do. They don't look at and say, okay, average is good. They look at it and say an average is, it's kind of average. I'm not average. I'm going to be above that and way beyond that. And that is my new baseline. So if you like this episode of this CEO Sales Strategies podcast and you love the subject matter, let me know. If you feel you have a subject matter that you would like to hear more on, or hey, let's say you might be the subject matter expert and you want to get onto our CEO Sales Strategies podcast, reach out to us at YouMatter. That's YOUMATTER at CEOsalesstrategies.com. If you love this podcast, give it a 5-star review. Tell other people about it. The more people that know, the more people we can help. If you want yourself or someone you know or your sales team or your company to get into the top 1% of earners, which means you raise your revenue, or if you're a company and you're looking for these top 1% earners, these elite sales performers, reach out to me at Doug at CEOsalesstrategies.com, Doug Brown 123 on LinkedIn, or call the company direct, 603-595-0303. So that's it. Another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Go out and sell something. Sell a lot of it. Play win-win. Sell it profitably. Make someone happy. Make yourself happy. And make people's days just brighter through what you do through selling. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit CEOsalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.